Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Janice Fukakusa. Thank you all for the honor of hosting this forum's close. First, I wish to acknowledge this land where I reside. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. A little bit about me, I'm Chancellor of Ryerson, and I lead our National Coalition Against Anti-Asian Racism. Our coalition brings together organizations and communities across Canada combating anti-Asian racism to share information, resources, and mitigate duplicated efforts. Thank you all for participating in these 2 days of expanding awareness, knowledge, and sharing best practices across Canada, and engaging in constructive discussion about how to develop and adopt permanent solutions. I'm so impressed by the passion, capability, and willingness of all of you to continue to work on solutions after today. We now have an excellent base to go forward. And with that, I'll begin the program. It's my pleasure to introduce Satwinder Bains, an associate professor in social culture, media studies, College of Arts at the University of Fraser Valley, to provide some remarks as a representative from the Forum Steering Committee. Satwinder?
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate the shout out. I'd like to also acknowledge that I've been coming for these last 2 days from the lands of the Stolo people, the people of the river in the central Fraser Valley, and I give thanks to them for allowing me as an uninvited settler on this land. I want to thank the organizers as well for this very important and powerfully important day, 2 days that especially with the goal towards action that was clear in all the work that we've undertaken over the last 2 days. I want to start by saying that the abiding conversations in this national forum have brought to the forefront in such a forceful and clear manner that we must have truth before reconciliation. Every speaker in the forum, every forum has foregrounded a commitment to undertake the work to decolonize anti-racism that we need to do in this time of reckoning with the Indigenous, First Nations, and Inuit communities. Building these bridges is something we all have to undertake as we make an ethical call for good relations and to further similar causes in real and intentional intersectional solidarity. I believe we have heard loud and clear that nothing can be done unless we are doing that work as a foreground to our work and to their rights-based position. We know that racism in Canada has a long historic legacy that is complex, brutally ugly, painful, deeply personal, and harmful, omitted, erased, and neglected from the structures that are supposed to teach this history. I think in this conversation, we heard that future generations, we all agree we must find ways to address the inequities and disparities, the ongoing tensions of belonging, of being Asian or Asian Canadian, the intense and uncalled for burdens that we carry, the inherent biases we face on a daily basis, the economic roadblocks related to overrepresentation in poverty, racial devaluation on so many levels and in so many sectors, the ongoing silencing, the effects of hypervisibility and invisibility, the ongoing grief and trauma that we all experience, the emotionally charged workspaces that are racist, yet deny racism exists, and have the unmitigated privilege to be shocked and surprised at the violence around us, the coded exclusive professional standards that prevent equitable access. I heard the call to move beyond diversity and representation towards racial equity. Instead of trying to change some of the people to fit the organization, we must focus on transforming our organization to fit all its people. We can no longer ignore the willful ignorance of racism and the willful innocence of a just and tolerant Canada. While keeping the historical frame, we will be ensuring that the contemporary is part of our planning process. The priority I heard is humanity, dignity of life, respect, trust, accountability, transparency, positional solidarity, better accessibility, beyond the trinity of intersectionality to include immigration and refugee status, geographic understandings and connectivity, ensuring inclusion of vulnerable groups and using any privilege and power we have to advocate with them and for them. Important and thoughtful coalition and allyship building within us and externally, actively finding our common causes and acting upon them, building activism, demanding ethical practices at our workplaces, our organizations, and in our institutions, mobilizing our political, social, and economic clout without asking for permission, breaking down not only our silos, but also the silos in the halls of power that have excluded us, building capacity for inclusive research that disaggregates the data for our benefit and with our input, supporting the validation of our experiences, demanding racial equity competencies at our workplaces. The words I heard over and over again were, we need to be uplifting each other. We need to be speaking and acting on truth to power, ensuring lived experiences are believed, trusted, and respected. As Brant Lewis so beautifully said, make trust your currency and be an informed optimist. There will be disruption, conflict, and racial discourse. These radical discourse, these are necessary as part of a transformational exercise of reciprocity as we address anti-Asian racism in the form of a national discourse. While globalization has brought us all together on an economic level, there is still a great deal of discomfort by and within dominant individuals and groups where structural systemic disadvantages are called to question. Whether it's in leadership, pay equity, precarity, and structural racism, or racialized aggressions in our daily interactions. Resistance is always going to be present, but the sheer energy of the young people in the rooms was truly impressive. They were fiery, they were outspoken, they were brave, they were charting new roadways and highways, questioning the status quo, and finding new meanings in our past discursive spaces. This is something that uplifted me as older warriors look for succession. Lastly, the big question that we're all required to contemplate and engage with is, how do we define the diversity of Asian? And further to it, Asian Canadian as a category, as a political category perhaps. We know it is a contested term that needs, above all, the solidarity of common experiences, common struggles, and common desires with all of us that have vested interest. The point of connection will need to be built beyond today, I believe locally, provincially, and nationally. To build a more inclusive intersectional anti-racism plan against going forward, we will have to commit to understanding history, interrogating our personal biases, building empathy and respect for each other without tokenism, seeing each other and listening to each other in all our vulnerabilities, challenging counter-representation practices that are attached to white heteronormativity. And while Canada demands singular colonial flavored citizenship affiliation, as Canadians, we will not be shamed if we express and show transnational commitments to homes left behind, whether it is through activism, financial support, or political action. We're going to be building solidarity across and with other anti-racism groups doing similar work as us and facing similar concerns. We're going to commit to staying engaged through the stretch that is necessary to push through to change, slow as it might be. This work is never done. And over again, we heard that we're committing to sustained steps over time to demonstrate a multifaceted and long-term investment in this work. While this work is hard and takes a deeply personal toll, we know the cost of IBPOC people is enormous. And while we have been carrying the burden of educating others and fighting racism by ourselves, we have, through these conversations, found the support to use our understanding, to not disproportionately shoulder this burden. We are getting politically engaged. We are becoming active. We are working with our communities to decolonize our minds and practices, as well as to work with the racism in our own communities. We are naming our truths and owning and saying our names the way they should be said, in all their beauty. So who needs to be involved? Carol Lau said that in her sector group, there were powerful people who want to do the work. She said they need to take our needs to decision makers. That's the movement that needs to happen. The conversations must continue. Henry, we already have a table. This is the new table. And Muhammad, our gates are open to create cross-sectoral support for a common demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Satwinder, for those very engaging thoughtful comments. I think that that most of all, what you've told us is that we all have voices. We need to use the voices, and we need to ensure we don't, in the process, lose our values that we stand for, like trust, integrity, transparency, in moving this agenda forward. So that was an excellent summary. And also, thank you so much for being on the organizing committee. It was quite a task, and you guys have done a fantastic job that we truly appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Zool Suleman, the Executive Director of the Rungh Cultural Society and also a member of the Forum Steering Committee. Zool?
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers and participants for an amazing and inspiring event. The energy is palpable, and I think our challenge is to figure out where to go with that energy. A great deal has been, shared over the past 2 days, and I would like to keep my thoughts brief by sharing just a few comments. First, the idea of intergenerational knowledge exchange stood out for me. As I listened to older and younger voices, I was struck by how much we need those exchanges. If we are not to reinvent the wheel, but move the wheel in a different direction, we need to focus on these elder and youth conversations. Second, there's a refrain for tangible outcomes. All too often in the past, and I suspect in the future, we will have such forums, unfortunately. And I think our challenge is to see what we can achieve that's tangible, but we also need to, I think, look at things organically and view them as they come up from the grassroots. Who sits at the table is as important as what is shared at the table. We need to be, I think, inclusive and intersectional in where we're going with this. Finally, I think being inclusive raises its own host of issues about who is Asian. I think there needs to be more reflection about what it means to be Asian in today's Canada and globally. Am I Asian, for example? If I am, what do I have to contribute to conversations about being Asian? I'm increasingly in favor of specificity and location in every sense. Broad descriptive terms help to hide power from scrutiny. And I think we need to unearth the structures that uphold and sustain racism. I think we need to figure out what the structures are upholding and then how we're going to approach to unwind and retool to challenge those structures. And so I think as a parting comment, it's important that we continue to have the forums that we are having. And I hope to be a part of these conversations as we move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zool, for your brief thoughts. I think that what you do talk about is quite true. This is an extremely complex matter, and it's an extremely long journey because we need to actually consult our past, present to go to the future. And we need to share all the learnings. And so I think that from our perspective going forward, we have to make sure we all stay together on the dialogue because these things come up episodically, but we need a real pressure on forcing ourselves to continue this journey until we can make the systemic change, or we might be going through this again in 10 years. And I really don't want to, and I'm sure a lot of you don't want to either. So thanks for those very insightful comments. And now I'd like to introduce Hiro Ito, a representative from the Students Advisory Committee, who will now join us to provide some remarks. Hiro?
Thanks, Janice. Hi, everyone. Minasan konnichiwa. My name is Hiro, and I'm from UBC, and I'm currently speaking from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Before I begin, I just want to give a quick thank you to everyone who's been part of helping make this forum happen, and a special thank you to Diana Jung, who's given me the space and the confidence to speak today. I think it's a little bit of an understatement to say that a lot of us have been feeling extremely overwhelmed this year with the ongoing public health crises, of course, and the rise of violence and violent narratives. Personally, for me, it's been quite a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes furious, hearing about the injustices happening in the world, sometimes heartbroken, sometimes even skeptical that change could even happen, feeling like such a small person in such a big world, not feeling like as a student my impact would be any impact at all. But actually, one of the feelings that I've been having trouble grappling with, that many of my student peers can relate to, is the sense of guilt. As a settler of color, living on this land, benefiting on this land, despite not knowing enough about it. As a Japanese Canadian, not knowing enough about the pain and suffering that went on in the internment camps for the Japanese Canadians that came before me, as well as some of the pain and suffering caused by Imperial Japan as well. And also the guilt for being paralyzed in fear and not being the activist that I envision myself to be. I think we all have this idea that we would know everything and be everything and do everything in our powers. But with everything going on, I think a lot of us have been paralyzed in fear. But if I've learned anything throughout these 2 days in this forum, and one of the key lessons that I would like to take home with me is that we don't need to be the experts to have a voice in this conversation. And that's really helped me shift this feeling of guilt that I've had to one of more empowerment. And it's really helped me. And the idea that all of our lived experiences are meaningful and can help inform movements and decisions and have a spot at the table, as we've discussed so many times throughout the 2 days. And in particular, I've been really inspired by the speakers and the dialogue that's been happening as well in the student lounge as well. That's a little bit more behind the scenes. But listening to all these people with different expertise and insights, put on the hat of a student like myself and engage in learning, and of course share their insights, but actively listen and think of ways that we can work together has been really, really inspiring as a student. And those are the kind of spaces that I hope to work in. And I hope to really continue these interdisciplinary discussions within my own peer group as well. With these thoughts in mind, there's 2 things that I would like to carry forward with me in my practice. One is the practice of humility. I know Amy Go did a fantastic job touching on this in day 1, but the reality is that we're prone to making mistakes. We're not, as much as we're passionate, as much as we have our own expertise, we are going to make mistakes. And I think part of holding ourselves accountable and others accountable is practicing that humility and recognizing the spaces where we may make mistakes and we may not know enough. And recognizing that we're active agents, obviously, in, helping to enable progress, but also, even if unintentionally, upholding systems of oppression. And I think this practice of humility is especially key for topics as broad as racism and even anti-Asian racism. It's super broad, and I think recognizing areas where we can learn more will be key, and taking an intersectional lens, of course, will also be very critical, I believe, in helping recognize individuals within this larger community who need to have their voices heard. And another key thing that I would like to take away with me is to become comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. And this is also something that's been brought up multiple times throughout the 2 days. And I'm probably repeating a lot of words from the earlier speakers, but to create a safe space for dialogue, even if it's uncomfortable. And I think this is a great start. I think having this forum with people from all different sectors, including students, including people in policy and grassroots organizations, I think it's a great start. But the reality is we're all coming in from a place of passion, of wanting to tackle this problem of anti-Asian racism and racism as a whole. But I think moving forward, I'd love to have uncomfortable conversations with people who are outside of this community that we've gathered here today. So people without the same sense of urgency, people with maybe conflicting views, and maybe people, students like myself, who don't have the tools to engage in this kind of dialogue meaningfully. So I think moving forward, it would be important not to gatekeep these kind of movements, to extend it, to build capacity, especially among students who are going to be leaders in the future, so that we can keep these conversations going. And yeah, so just in summary, I know I spoke a lot there, but I think despite a lot of the feelings of guilt that I've experienced, I hope that we can be proud of who we are, embrace our identities as Asian Canadians or however you identify, and embrace humility while creating safe spaces for conversations that may be uncomfortable. And just before I wrap up here, I just want to say, if you're a student like myself listening in right now, there is a student dialogue happening next week on June the 18th. And so I think this would be a great opportunity for us to practice some of those skills and engage in these kind of conversations. はい、皆さん聞いてくれてありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiro. I think that your commitment to learning not only about your own history, but the history from everyone that you spoke to at the dialogue and beyond that is admirable. That passion is admirable. And I think there's two particular things that you say that are so relevant. It's about safe spaces to speak, and I hope that becomes more of a norm, and also the sense of urgency. Because I think that if we can go forward with the sense of urgency, along with having safe conversations, we might get to some good advancements and even some change of a systemic nature. Because with you and your students, your co-students all at the table, you have a lot of time and energy and a lot to push this forward. So I congratulate you all. I'm so happy you have that passion, and you have all our support. So please carry on. Thank you, Hiro.
Thank you so much.
So this forum is the first of continuing discussions and actions as you know, making systemic change takes a lot of thought and coordinated execution. So now we have some very special announcements to share to continue our journey. So first, I'd like to welcome Stewart Beck, President and CEO with the Asia Pacific Foundation, to announce a very exciting national initiative. Stewart?
Well, thank you very much, Janice, and congratulations to all the organizers and participants of this forum. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this important conversation. And the foundation and I myself reside on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. What an impressive 2 days it has been. For me as President and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, the calls to action I have heard to build awareness, to prioritize coalition building, and cultural understanding resonate strongly with our mission. The Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada is a national, not-for-profit organization established by the federal government in 1984 to be an independent source of information, insight, and analysis on a changing Asia and a changing Canada-Asia relationship. One of our key initiatives is focused on designing educational resources that acknowledge and reflect the Asian experience in Canada. In 2017, we launched the Asia Pacific Curriculum Pilot Project in partnership with the BC government, where we have worked with the BC Ministry of Education, members of the BC Social Studies Teachers Association, and directly with teachers to create curriculum, materials, and professional development opportunities on Asia and Asian Canadian history. Our support for this project is driven by two beliefs. First, that the world beyond Canada's borders is changing in profound and fundamental ways. Second, fundamental changes are happening within Canada's borders. Specifically, a growing segment of our population traces our heritage to Asia, and that trend is only going to grow in the coming years. For instance, in 2016, 48% of Canada's immigrants were born in Asia, and Statistics Canada estimates that by 2036, this percentage will be as high as 58%. We at APF Canada feel that we can play a crucial role in helping to educate all young Canadians about the countries and cultures that are increasingly important to us. That includes the experiences and contributions of communities of Asian descent here in Canada. When we launched the Asia Pacific Curriculum Project in BC 4 years ago, we did so with a longer-term vision to take it to a national scale. We imagine an Asia Pacific K through 12 curriculum that reflects Canada's strength as a diverse society, inspires understanding and inclusivity, and increases awareness of the cultural diversity that represents Canada's population. Our national public opinion polling shows that shows not only that a majority of the Canadian public in every province and region supports this, but also that this support has been growing steadily over time, with 63% of Canadians indicating their support for provincial governments placing more emphasis on teaching about Asia. We are reaffirming our commitment to continue this work. This includes identifying financial supporters who also recognize the importance of Asia competence, of investing in education about Asia as key to understanding Canada's past, its present challenges, its future potential, and in building a culture of tolerance and empathy. It includes partnerships with many other Asian Canadian organizations that have been active in educating young Canadians about Asian Canadian history and important issues about racism and discrimination. Finally, it includes a steadfast commitment to continuing to work directly with Canadian K-12 teachers so that we are supporting and empowering them to lead in this important work. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Stewart, and thank you to the Asia Pacific Foundation for all the great work that you've been doing for the past 4 to 5 years on the curriculum build and also in placing it into the BC schools. I will tell you this, to everyone this, that the work that is done by Asia Pacific Foundation is fantastic and groundbreaking. And I think that your initiative in trying to take it national will be excellent at actually changing the dialogue around Asian and Asian Canadians' contributions to Canada's history and Canada's future. So you can count on all of us to the extent we can to help you roll out that to a national audience, because I think that it is very long in coming, but will be absorbed very quickly. So thanks for all your effort, and thank you to the team at Asia Pacific Foundation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Pam Sugiman, Dean of Arts at Ryerson. Pam is here to make another special announcement. Over to you, Pam.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Janice. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of this national forum, as well as the many participants I've listened to closely over these 2 days, and from them I've learned a great deal. Not only have I acquired knowledge and perspective, but I've also been inspired by the many exceptionally talented and wise Asian Canadian faculty, staff, students, and community advocates. And I'd like to take a moment to comment on the student speakers in particular. It's been an absolute pleasure to listen to your thoughtful, informed, and passionate ideas. You've skillfully conceptualized some of the most troubling and complex problems of the day. You've been unapologetic about drawing on your lived experience, and you have boldly voiced your views. So listening to you yesterday and today has led me to reflect on my days, which many decades ago, as an undergraduate student, a young Japanese Canadian girl from a working class family, a family that had been interned on the basis of our race during the Second World War. As an undergraduate, I experienced extreme discomfort, indeed a sense of not belonging on a university campus. In classes, I was afraid to speak, and I was filled with anxiety at the thought that one of my professors would call on me to answer a question. Not once did I verbally state my views, though I did so freely in writing, and when I could avoid a conversation with a professor, I did so. Yet at the same time, as a university student, thanks to some forward-thinking professors, I engaged with new ideas. For the first time, I became equipped with frameworks for situating my fractured racial identity as a highly assimilated Japanese Canadian sensei, shame of my working class Asian family, and tentativeness among peers. My university education politicized me, for sure. And as I listened to the students in this forum, I could see both progress and, in many ways, a lack of change. I could also see the ways in which the education sector impedes transformative change and at the same time has the potential to open doors to those who will challenge the status quo. So today, as a university administrator, I feel a responsibility to advocate for the creation of more spaces in which all students and faculty can thrive, spaces in which we can reimagine curriculum, spaces in which we can decenter whiteness in the academy. And with this in mind, it is my pleasure to announce that the Faculty of Arts at Ryerson University will grab the baton from UBC, and we will host the next major event, an event in which we'll continue these crucial conversations about anti-Asian racism. The next forum will be a multi-university, interdisciplinary gathering of faculty, contract lecturers, students, staff, unions, and faculty associations, and importantly, community advocates, all of whom will have an opportunity to speak to racism and the need for anti-racist work in higher education. It will be a forum in which we build on the ideas shared in this important UBC Canadian Race Relations Foundation event. And in an effort to build solidarities and alliances, we will also invite to the table scholars and advocates who are working to challenge anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism in the academy. At this moment in time, in my view, it's critical that universities look inward. And what better place than my university to take up this challenge? As host of this upcoming conference, we will have an opportunity to directly address the problem that all universities in Canada must recognize. If we wish to support and advance the broader cause of anti-racist work in this country, universities must be committed to confront their own colonial past. I am hopeful that all of you today will participate in our forum and our specific focus on anti-racism and higher education. Now, we haven't yet set a firm date. We're hoping possibly for the fall. I think that we are going to get started working on this immediately if we do have any steam left after planning for a return to campus this fall. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Pam. I think this is really good, and all what I listened to in a lot of the readouts today, and all of them actually, is that wanting to have another destination and to carry on the dialogue. And I'm sure that everyone who's listening now and who was on one of the groups will now be really happy, because I saw that you were planning a lot of meetings and keeping your group together after this. And I think this is a really good next destination. And I'm saying next because there will be more next. And Santa, I'd like to thank you and your team for this great partnership with Ryerson, because definitely you put in so much work and you shamed us all. And so we're stepping up to the challenge and actually trying to recruit more team members. So it will become a national initiative. So thank you, Pam, very much for that. And everyone stay tuned for the announcement. And I would like to now introduce Gage Averill, the Dean, Faculty of Arts at UBC. So please join me in welcoming Gage. Over to you, Gage.
Thanks so much, Janice. I'm going to repeat the accolades of my colleagues for the organizers of the conference, for your own role and Santa's role in this. It's an extraordinary piece of work, and I really thank Dean Sugiman for announcing our next destination, and we'll be very glad to join you all there. I'm also pleased to be coming to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, which include Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. 12 years ago, UBC was challenged by Asian Canadian community members to recognize the Asian, mostly Japanese Canadian students who were displaced from UBC during World War II to camps, generally camps in the interior, and who never graduated from UBC. And we bestowed on the surviving students, and then posthumously to those who were no longer with us, to their families, honorary degrees to recognize the harm done by the university's complicity with what really can be called state-sponsored anti-Asian racism of the time. In addition, at that time, I committed for UBC's Faculty of Arts and for the university to build a program which became known as ACAM, Asian, Canadian, and Asian Migration Studies, which is dedicated to the history, the culture, and social development of the diverse Asian communities, Asian Canadian communities here in their global context. And at the core of this program was, and it still is, a commitment to ethical collaboration with communities in the co-creation of knowledge. And I want to thank our faculty and staff members and our students who've had this high level of interest in this program for their passionate work. It really has become a thriving program over these years, serving thousands of students. I should have a better number than that, but thousands of students. And it's hosted many very high-profile public events. And along with the Institute for Study of Race, Gender, and Social Justice, and the Institute for Critical Indigenous Studies, ACAM has barely been a pillar at UBC for intersectional anti-racist pedagogy. But, you know, as we've recognized throughout this, this forum for the last couple days, we're really at a historical inflection point right now. It's highlighted by the accounts we've heard, and we're faced with a need that we've articulated many times for concrete initiatives, measures, and palpable structural changes, institutional structural changes, to continue to confront and uproot anti-Asian racism in Canada and globally. So I'm honored to announce that as part of UBC's ongoing commitments to this process, we'll launch a Center for Asian Canadian Research and Engagement, which is, if you've been quickly catching the acronym ACRE, A-C-R-E, housed in UBC's Faculty of Arts, but reaching out across our university and linking to our communities and working with other institutions across the nation. This is going to bring together UBC's existing research infrastructure, as well as the strong and significant linkages with Asian Canadian communities. It'll be dedicating new resources and activity, including new faculty positions, to building a center that'll serve as a platform to innovate and collaborate across national, local, transnational partners to implement bold action we need to eradicate anti-Asian racism within our lifetimes. And when I say lifetimes, I'm really thinking, if I'm to be downbeat, I'm thinking about the lifetimes of our younger members here over the weekend. And to strengthen, of course, Asian Canadian community capacity. So every one of us participating in this forum is going to recognize that we have a long way to go in our efforts to transform our societies, into ones that are equitable and socially just. But we at UBC look forward to partnering with our sister institutions, and especially with Ryerson and Dean Sugiman on the upcoming Higher Education Forum we were just talking about, and with national coalition partners and others to monitor media coverage of Asian Canadian issues. So I want to thank, in closing, especially our local president, UBC's President Santa Ono, not only for hosting the event, but also along with his wife, Wendy Yip, for a really heartfelt and enduring support for our efforts in this area. And thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you, Gage, and what a great announcement to set up the ACRE Center. It's fantastic that there's now a home, I would say nationally, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but nationally for this, and to anchor it with the permanent home for us, because we've been looking, and throughout the dialogue in hearing about the work groups and the fact that they're all with members from people across Canada and sharing resources, etc., sharing resources, tools. This will be a godsend to escalate and also to fast track the movement. So thank you all, and thank you, Santa, for doing this. And I think that this will be pivotal in driving the agenda forward too. So it's not just a one-time thing. Really appreciate that. So now I would like to make a special announcement from our national coalition. And we've heard, and Gage talked about the importance of Media Watch. And so what I would like to announce that we will continue to develop the Media Watch, which will act as an observatory for monitoring anti-Asian racism in media content. So what the Media Watch will be doing is we'll analyze, review, and report on the activity of Asian communities in news and social media, and will identify trends in both negative portrayals, such as harmful stereotypes, as well as positive portrayals, such as inclusive and empowering narratives about Asian people. The data will make it possible to develop toolkits and other resources for students and media professionals about anti-Asian racism. John Shiga and Sibo Chen from Ryerson School of Professional Communications, Faculty of Communication and Design will lead on this, and our recruiting team members. And I think that both of them were at the two-day dialogue, and I'm sure that the media team that was here, a lot of you will carry on with that. So, and we will begin to engage with UBC and Carleton, as well as community mainstream groups and media organizations. And we will actively plan to work with the other universities in the Prairies and Atlantic Canada. So our timeline is in the coming year. We plan to focus on research and consultation and aligning with other Media Watch organizations across Canada and the US. And we hope to have a prototype by early 2022. And while this Media Watch will start with anti-Asian racism related issues, we hope to be able to use the insights on other forms of racism and discrimination in Canada. And the Media Watch is going to be part of a larger initiative that would inform and support collaborations between scholars, journalists, and media creators to develop and promote storytelling, reporting, and artistic production. And you've heard a lot of that about that through the last 2 days, about a lot of the power of getting the message across is storytelling. And I think this will be very additive to the velocity in getting a lot of our stories out. So that's my announcement. And I'd now like to turn it over to you, Santa, for the close. Thank you very much. And thank you all for having me here to host the closing. It's really a privilege and an honor to be here. Santa?
Well, thank you so much, Janice. And let me start off by thanking you for being the chair of this national coalition and honoring me by asking me to be involved. What you've done for Canada to confront anti-Asian racism is simply monumental. And I'm looking forward to doing everything I can to support you and the other members of the coalition and everybody who has come together over these past couple of days to continue this long-standing work that we need to do together. But I'm thrilled with the progress that has been made with the announcement about this multi-institution Media Watch initiative centered at Ryerson. I have to say, honestly, I hope that one of the outcomes of this is that UBC and Ryerson will think of many ways to work together. It's a powerful relationship, and hopefully we can work on that. And I want to thank Pam for agreeing to take on this next forum or higher education symposium. And we will do everything we can to be supportive of you. And thank you so much for what you've done for this national forum. And I'd like to also thank Gage. Gage, what you've done as Dean for UBC has been simply transformative. But if you think about your impact on this area, with your commitment to founding ACAM, which is really a jewel at this institution, that is an accomplishment in and of itself. But then to top that off with yet another center focused in this very, very important moment to confronting anti-Asian racism. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment. And I can tell you, Gage, that I will do everything I can to be supportive of your leadership and vision in this area. I also wanted to say something about our students. You have been simply inspirational. And I'm going to say something specifically to Hiro. You know, I was incredibly moved by your comments, and I completely understand as another Japanese Canadian, I'm a Nisei, about your comments about guilt, and Pam about your comments about being afraid to speak up when I was an undergraduate. And both of your comments really brought back a flood of memories to me. So to both of you, thanks for your vulnerability, your humility, your honesty, and these are just a couple of examples of that kind of honesty and humility that we've witnessed over these 2 days. That's powerful and binds us together. And so thank you, Hiro, for your comments, but also for letting us watch you really blossom during these several days and the days leading up to today, to the closing. And I can feel your empowerment. And it is because of students and note takers such as yourself that I feel optimistic and hopeful that we will turn back this anti-Asian racism, but also systemic racism in general. You have been inspirational as a group, and we will be there to support all of you across Canada, our students, on June 18th at the Student Forum. I know that I'm told that this participation for you has been transformative, and that you are thinking about changing your vocation from counseling to public health. And I can tell you, whatever vocation you choose, you will be a transformative force, individually as a person, but collectively, all of the students that are listening, thank you. You really do bring hope to everyone assembled here today about the future. Over the last 2 days, we have heard the devastating impacts of anti-Asian racism on individuals and communities across Canada, and we know around the world. The discovery in Kamloops of 215 Indigenous children who never return to their own families and communities, and the mass murder this week of a family in London, Ontario, because of anti-Muslim hate, have hung heavily over the entire discussion. We have heard that this conversation needs to continue from each of you and become powerful action, even beyond what we've heard today, and that we need to come together, all of us, to struggle against this hate and the ongoing structures of Canadian and global society that allow it to perpetuate. And Pam, you're absolutely right. We have to look inward at our institutions, and we have lots of hard work to do. But once again, looking to our students, there's so much reason for hope and optimism. It will be a long struggle, but I want to reaffirm that the University of British Columbia is committed to working with all of those who have come together to act as one over these past few days. None of us can take on alone the enormity, the breadth, the depth of the problems that have been identified over the last 2 days, but isn't it wonderful that we've come together in a multi-sectoral way to have honest, sometimes painful conversations about those issues? We need to continue to work together in that way. And I hope that more people across Canada will support us in this work. And I know it's happening with over 1,000 people tuning in over the past couple of days. And for those of you who may just be joining in at the end, join us in this difficult task. Give of your own experience and knowledge to identify and change. Each and every one of you is necessary in your own special way to help change the world for the better. If you can't give of your time, please think of other ways that you can join us in this effort. As a university, UBC has, as Pam has said, a responsibility to work on the areas that we need to improve. We heard this morning from Dr. Cheryl Lightfoot and her team about the hard work that lies ahead for this nation, for this world, with respect to truth and reconciliation. And you heard about our Indigenous Strategic Plan. It's in its early stages, and there's lots of work that has to take place with many people across the entire institution for us to start to make a difference in terms of what has happened with colonialism in this country. And the struggle against anti-Asian racism also needs to be addressed with the same kind of systematic and thoughtful approach. If we are to transform our universities, to overcome the ongoing legacies of colonialism against each set of individuals that is affected by colonialism. Once again, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to participate in this much needed forum. I'd like to especially thank Stewart Beck, Pam Sugiman, Gage Averill, Janice Fukakusa for joining me in this announcement of several exciting next steps. I'd also like to thank our keynote speakers, panelists, and moderators for sharing their stories and their views. And finally, thanks again to the members of the National Coalition, the Steering Committee, the Academic Advisory Committee, multiple planning groups, everyone involved with putting this event together, volunteers, and the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, with whom we have been collaborating over many, many hours over the past couple of months. I'd like to especially thank Henry Yu and the members of ACAM for your tireless work and sleepless nights leading up to this forum. Though this particular forum is ending, our work is just beginning. We will take the results and recommendations arising from the forum, and we have so many notes to guide our future steps, and we will share that with you in different kinds of documents in the days and weeks ahead. There will be a follow-up event focusing on, as you've heard from Pam, anti-Asian racism in higher education in the fall. So finally, thank you, all of you, once again. I look forward to working with you all as we move forward. We have active listeners available from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. Pacific time. Please take care of yourself this evening and over the weekend. Thank you very much, everyone.